Hey, this is Glenn. Welcome to another episode of Difficult Questions. This one, how do we make people be productive members of society? I was talking to my friend and we were talking about being a good person. And one of the things she said about being a good person was to get a job. And I thought about that because that's very much how I was raised. And then I thought about Fight Club and the bathroom scene where Brad Pitt is saying, I asked my dad, what do I do? And he said, go to college. And then after I graduated from college, I called him up and I said, what do I do? And he said, I don't know, get a job. And then he got a good job and he said, well, Dad, what do I do now? And he said, I don't know, get married. And that has kind of been the planning of the society that we've had, at least since I've been a kid. But we've seen that just getting a job doesn't necessarily mean you are going to be successful. This country is about what you can get. It always has been. And there are no guarantees. I got myself a degree in homelessness, as I like to call it, because it was a theater degree. And it was very difficult to spin that into something that could make me a lot of money. Some people have done it, but there are no guarantees. We don't have a planned society. We don't have a do this, then this, then this. And we're kind of seeing that with the rise of people having problems finding affordable housing. I say that we're investing ourselves out of shelter. We look at property as an investment opportunity instead of shelter for people or stability for people. Jobs are more about, and I think have always been about how much you can exploit labor, how much you can get out of labor without paying them a lot of money. And with the rise of unions out of, I think, the 1950s, labor kind of had a hold. But as people were exploiting things for the short term, the money started to get moved around, hidden, spent, and we don't really have a promise of stability that I think my parents had, and they definitely shared with me. Be a stand-up member of society, do good, volunteer, go to college. Once you go to college, you have a piece of paper. Someone will pay you a certain amount of money for a certain job. If you want a higher paying job, you then go get another piece of paper and someone else is going to pay you more money for that. That doesn't really work out. It depends on what degree you get. And as the economy works and as we see, things go in and out of demand. So there are no guarantees. And every kid gets trained differently away from school and in school. So there are these different knowledge bases. My parents didn't know much about business or finance, so I was left to figure it out on my own. And some people do have that background. I have a friend of mine, his father was into real estate, so he kind of knew real estate, and his family was able to help him. That's the other thing we don't really have. Unless you have a family member or family members or a community that's willing to back you up while you are struggling to get you to that next level, you either luck out or you maybe fall down and you maybe can't get back up. And depending on how smart you are, how wily you are, how cunning you are, that'll dictate how successful you are. One of the things I started finding out was in 2015 when I moved to LA, and I would just ask people, how do you make money? How do you make money? How do you make money? And there were a lot of ways to make money that I thought were kind of unscrupulous. One of the ways that has been recent is selling homeowners solar panels. And my landlady got told by a solar panel salesman that the state of California would pay for it. That wasn't written down. He denied saying that. She got into some solar stuff, some finances that were not presented to her. So that's kind of the American way, though. You always have to watch out for yourself. I always say, know the game that you are being asked to be played. I bought a house in 2006. 2008, the housing crisis happened, and we had all those subprime loans, and it really hurt investment. The school I was working for had made investments in those subprime loans, so they were losing money. So then I started to get cut back at work. So then I had to call my bank and figure out what I was going to do. And I was told to be an upstanding member of society. If you were going to have problems, you made a deal, own that deal, talk to the bank. And then after browbeating the bank and them not talking to me, someone on the line finally said, "We won't talk to you until you stop paying. You have to prove to us that you don't have the money." And I just thought, oh, it's about the game of influence and understanding the game of influence. That's not how my grandfather told me to be. He told me to be straightforward. My parents told me I needed to be straightforward with people. But straightforward people sometimes lose to people that are willing to tell them the good story. And we want to hear the good story. So we're always set up to fail. We are not a planned community. It's all about what you can get for yourself and what you can get for your family. The only socialism we have is family and community. But we don't even admit that. It's this hard idea of you need to make this amount of money to survive. And everything comes down to your ability to make money. And if you don't know how to make money, or if you can't make it work, well, you're a worthless person. So that eats on people. I've met plenty of people who've just said, I can do bad by myself. I tried to play this game that people wanted me to play, and I lost everything. So I'm not playing I'm going to get a job to pay rent. I'm just going to live, and I'm going to make up my own rules. I'm going to squat where I can, and I'm going to camp where I can, and screw your laws. And I'm going to do illegal stuff that doesn't get me put in jail, but just allows me to live. Now we're not building upstanding members of society. Now we're talking about people that we're scared of on the subway and on the buses and on the streets and on the sidewalks. And we're talking about people that just walk into CVS and steal all the stuff. And now we're talking about, okay, we're going to go into a CVS, but all of the goods are going to be locked behind cabinets that we have to ask employees for. And is that a shopping experience that we want? I was just listening to a community member complain about how there were armed guards at her Target. She'd never had that. I live in Burbank. Burbank doesn't do that. Well, we're kind of seeing that we're not building strong, good, upstanding members of society. So how do we work with this? How do we turn the tide? How do we get people to be not so angry at each other? How do we get to have our communities not exploit each other? One of the things that I see all the time, having been hit by drivers and now riding a bicycle, and I'm in with drivers, and I'm just seen as in the way. I'm a mosquito to be annoyed or to be hit. Everyone's in a hurry. Everyone loves their convenience. They fight for their convenience. They don't think about the people next to them. They're all in these little enclosed boxes that they drive around. There's no real community, or we're always fighting for community. So how do we turn that tide? How do we build those upstanding members of society so we don't have people living on Paper Street like in Fight Club and looking to punch each other just to feel alive, right? That's very nihilistic. I don't think we want that. But we kind of have that. We're kind of steering towards that. And there's been a movement to kind of grab to Christianity. Christianity's the way. And I would say religion in general builds some of that stability. It builds some of that expectation of a community and what your part is in that community. And it doesn't have to be Christianity. I always say people need to find their center, whatever that center could be. It could be yoga. It could be motorcycle riding. It could be whatever. But we don't have this idea that we're all working together. And it's kind of coming apart, I see. So what do you think? What do you think needs to happen to build this feeling of community, to build this feeling of stability, to build this feeling of working with others instead of exploiting others? I don't know. What are your thoughts? Thanks.